Hello everyone! One very important aspect of our life is the production of food and caring about the land that is directly underneath our feet. Or it is perhaps the most important aspect. Together with that comes food sovereignty, the ability to feed ourselves, our family and our community without having to rely on big corporations that cannot care for the land we live on. In this video, Mathias will explain our attempts to holistically manage these lands that we have access to. So even though maybe you're not a farmer, you still eat food and you may find it interesting. We would also like to thank you all for all the well wishes we got on our previous video. It was a perfect day in every way. And if you haven't seen that video, you should.
I've been doing this for some years now and I've published over 100 videos, but sometimes I still find it hard to grab the camera and start talking. And I guess it is when I'm about to say something about the things that matters the most to me. I feel unsure that I won't be able to express what I really want to say about these things. But anyway, I now moved the sheep from here to here, or this morning I did, and now it's evening and they have been here the whole day. And I guess I should have them here for 2 days and 2 nights for the animal impact to become most sufficient, or how to say. But I also really need to move them forward so that the grass doesn't become yellow. That means that my flock is way too small. That's one of our biggest problems here. In the summer the flock could be many times bigger, but then in the winter it's a problem. We need winter feed for them all. And my guess is that when the vitality of these grounds, these fields and the grass has been maximized, or my hope is that due to our holistic management, or our attempt at holistically managing these lands, will make the lands as vital as they can be. And that also means that we can harvest much more grass to winter feed as well. Right now it's a little bit maybe not so good. Patches here and there are better than others, but I think in order to do it faster I need more animals. Yeah, and I forgot to mention this is what I was going to say. This is exactly the place where we first put them in the spring when the grass was barely showing. We moved them a lot faster then because there weren't enough grass, and now there is too much. I have built here now 2 additional paddocks, so the next couple of days I will just raise the fence and herd them to the next paddock. When it comes to food production, one of the most important aspects, I think, is that is it regenerative or degenerative? If one produces food in a degenerative way, eventually food will not be able to be produced on that land. At least to me, that is very simple logic. If one produces food in a regenerative way, the vitality of the land increases, and the soil water retention increases, and the biodiversity increases. And if one produces food in a degenerative way, everything gets worse every year. So to me at least, the regenerative capacity of how one manages land is the most important. There are already many examples of how powerful regenerative agriculture can be. In this example, there is 3 years apart from the pictures taken. Before, this land was a potato farm, and the ones caring about the land now have only used holistic plant grazing and chickens to restore this land. One interesting part is that there cannot be a set of rules on how one is regenerative. It always depends on the land and where you live. For me, up in northern Sweden, it is completely different than, for example, someone in Australia or southern Europe. The only important aspect is, does your management decisions regenerate the land or degenerate the land? So there cannot be a set of rules like there are, for example, to obtain the organic farming stamp, because my way of regenerating the land will differ from the next person's. And sometimes I have to make management decisions that degenerate the land, depending on situations. It is more important that the general curve is pointing upwards. One question that many seem to have about this regenerative agriculture is it scalable? Or will it be able to feed the world? For me, that is kind of a weird question, because will we be able to feed the world if we produce food in a degenerative way? I would say logically, no. So if one is concerned about feeding the world, I would say regenerative is the only way. But I would also say that it would be much easier if we were all concerned about feeding our family and our community first, and care about the environment surrounding us and the land that we live on. Then the problem of feeding the world will solve itself. This is what is called a holistic grazing plan. And this is the first year that we have used this kind of tool to holistically manage our animals. Or not just our animals, but all aspects of our lives, since it is called a holistic grazing plan. This is a genius tool developed by the Savory Institute. And if you want to know more about the works of Alan Savory and the Savory Institute, I really recommend this book, Holistic Management. There is an audiobook version as well for those of you who have no time for reading. And if you are in Sweden, I really recommend the Bäckedals Folkhögskola course, Regenerativt jordbruk and holistic management. So just briefly, here are the different grazing areas. So there is some math involved here. There is some the area and the perceived quality, and you do some calculations and you get how many days they can stay in one area. And here are all the days of the year and months. And one of these squares is 5 days. Each square has all the days in it. The upper line here is the planned time, and the bottom line here is when they actually were there. So later in the year here I just got planned times, but here I have documented where they have been. And these are happenings throughout the year. Here Tova is on a course, here we had our wedding party, and here we were on our friend's wedding. Here is the lambing season, and here we shared the sheep. And here I had documented that the snow was almost gone. And all these goes down like a line like this because these affects all the areas. So for instance, when they were going to start lamping, we wanted them in a specific place. So we started this plan by drawing this line here. So that is the holistic aspect of the whole plan here, that everything is accounted for, not just the animals and the grass. One of the most important aspects of this grazing plan is that you can plan for the resting period and the grazing periods. So for instance, on this grazing area, they were here for 14 days from this date to that date, and then we moved them on to the others. And so I know if I follow the plan, they will not get back to this same area in this many days. So here is at least 30 days so that the grass can rest and regrow. And then they are here again, and then there is a resting period, and then they probably are here again, depending on when the snow comes. So with this plan, I know that the grass doesn't get overgrazed, and I know that it will rest and doesn't get overrested either before the animals are there again, and so on and so on. But as you can see here, we didn't follow the plan as good. We are still learning this and learning our grounds and learning how the seasons change, the growth of the grass, and also depending on how many animals we have. So it started well here. We followed the plan, but then we come here and we needed them to be there more time, and we skipped that one. And then we got here and a lot more time, and that one I drew wrong. For the time being, the sheep are sort of following the plan. Oh man, I have no idea if I succeeded in explaining this in a good way, but I guess you got the general idea. There are some other math involved here as well regarding the size of the herd. If you have cows or if you have chickens and so on, and how many animal units, and I have not really understood how the two relates in the calculations. Of course, I understand that if you have more animals, you need to move faster or you need more space. With this tool, it's easy to have a good overview of where the animals need to be at a certain time, depending on what other things are happening in your life. Also, environmental aspects. Like in the fall, it could be too muddy at one place, so you don't want them there. Another great aspect with this is that you can be sure when you have done this plan that you always have green growing grass for your animals. You're much less likely to end up in a situation where they have eaten all and there's nowhere for them to move. And I guess you can see how interesting I think this is and exciting. And I'm really, really looking forward to see how this affects the land. Some of the important terms to try to understand regarding regenerative agriculture is overgrazing, overresting, animal impact, continuous grazing, and holistic plant grazing, adaptive multi-paddock grazing, or rotational grazing. Those last three are very different, but they are sometimes used to mean the same. This land, I would say, is overrested. We have not had the animals here since very early in the spring, so most of the grass has grown and become yellow. I let it do this because I wanted to focus on vitalizing the fields where we have the sheep now. And before this, these grounds were very overgrazed, so I guess it could be a positive thing. That's the hard part, knowing whether your management decisions will revitalize or not. Only time will tell. Overgrazing is what happens to the grass when the animals are on the same place for too long. And the act of having the animals on the same place for too long is called continuous grazing. When talking about animal impact, I mean how much impact did the animals have on a particular area. And what generally gives a good regenerative result is to concentrate the animal impact in one area for a short period of time and then move the animals. So basically the animal impact is the animals trampling and eating the grass and defecating. So the last three, holistic plant grazing, adaptive multi-paddock grazing and rotational grazing, is basically three different ways of moving the animals around according to a plan on a given area. I won't go into detail about the differences between those and why there are multiple terms for basically the same thing, but I'm rooting for the holistic plant grazing. Here is an interesting picture that illustrates different ways of managing land. We are managing the land in the middle here with multi-paddock holistic grazing. This is only the second summer we have done so, so the vitality of the land is not as good as it could be. Before we got access to this land, it had been harvested for winter feed many years, and the grass had not seen any ruminant animals for a long time. I have not been able to find out when it had last been plowed, but I know it have not been plowed for the last 10 years at least. In our grazing plan, we have divided this land up into two sections, in order to try to keep all the sections on the grazing plan roughly the same size. You can clearly see the divide in the middle of the area. When this picture was taken, it was 17 days ago the sheep was on the upper section, and it was 43 days ago they were on the lower section. This land has been continuously grazed by cows for many years, very overgrazed and very little rest. The patches of grass is where the cows have dropped a pile of dung. They prefer not to eat around their own dung. And the grass in between is grazed very, very short, so the photosynthetic activity here is very low. And the grass has to use energy from their roots in order to grow, instead of capturing the energy from the sun. This land has been turned over 3 summers ago, and have since then not had animals on it, but winter feed has been harvested from it every year. This picture was taken a couple of weeks after the first harvest. When land gets turned over, all the microlife get a really hard time, and the land has to start over basically from scratch. There is not much biodiversity on land like this. The roots are very shallow, and there is very much bare ground between the plants. In this case, on this particular land, it was some years ago it was turned over, so the growth of the plants are starting to get a bit more dense, but the biodiversity is very lacking. But back to how we try to manage this land in the middle holistically. So at the moment, we have our sheep in this particular section in our grazing plan. And as I said earlier, it was 43 days ago they were here last. So this land has now been resting for 43 days. And is now getting grazed again. This is the section that is defined in our grazing plan, but inside this section we build smaller paddocks where they stay for 1 day, 2 days or 3 days at the most, depending on the quality of the grass and the size of the paddock. When they first came to this section, they were in this paddock, and in this picture one could say that this looks very overgrazed, like the animals have been there for too long. But in this particular section, the plants consist of mostly nettles and fireweed, so there is a very high percentage of bare ground, as one can see when the sheep has been trampling them. The dark green patches that is still there is nettles. And after 2 days, they were moved to this paddock, and after that, they moved to the next paddock, and so on, until this whole section is grazed. And then we move the sheep somewhere else. At the time of recording this voiceover, they are actually at the top section of this picture, because the land there have now rested for long enough, the grass has grown, and the microlife has taken care of all the sheep droppings, which means that the sheep doesn't have to graze among their own droppings. And I guess that's all I can think of telling you about this picture. It will be very interesting to see how these lands respond to the different management styles. This way of managing grazing animals is trying to mimic the relationship grazing animals, predatory animals, and grass have in nature. One cannot live without the other. Here I'm trying to illustrate that. All the ruminant animals is out grazing on the grass, and when there are no predatory animals, they roam freely and eat what they like and choose. This leads to overgrazing, and several species will have a hard time with this constant grazing. Predatory animals plays a key role in a functioning ecosystem. When they show up, herding animals will bunch together as a defense. They will eat, trample, and spread manure over a concentrated place, which leads to them automatically moving away from the place where they just were. This will go on, and they will not come back to the first place they were before all the manure has been integrated into the soil. So since we don't only want to feed the other predatory animals, we try to mimic this behavior with fencing. Imagine this is the area where you can have your grazing animals. If you release them to the whole area in the spring, they will continuously graze the whole area. The grass will never get any rest, and the vitality of the land will suffer. So instead of doing it like that, we will bunch the herding animals together using the fencing. We will concentrate the animal impact on one place, and then we will move them forward. And they will not get back to the first paddock before it have had the opportunity to rest and the microlife have taken care of the droppings. This example with only 4 paddocks is too small, but you get the idea.
Vad är det?
Vad var det? Det är några bajs. Internetbete. Internetbete. Där har de bajsat.
When moving sheep this much and managing them in the way we do, these flexinets are a great tool to have. And this net is our favorite, with only one spike, and it's 90 centimeters long and has 14 poles, so I can hold the whole net in one hand like this. With this flexinet, it's very easy to quickly build paddocks and quickly take them down as well. You can build paddocks fast by yourself. It's a little bit more work. If you're 2 persons, it goes even faster. But if you're by yourself, it's very easy. You just start with one end, put it down, and I use this technique with helping with my armpit. So I can still keep these ones in the other hand. If the ground is very hard, I maybe need to put these down and help with both hands. And then I just One very important thing when getting one of these flexinets is to check that the vertical lines here is made of this plastic that is a lot harder than the horizontal lines. These stiff vertical plastic lines throughout the fencing is helping the fencing to stay up. There are versions of this flexinet with also this thread going vertically, and they are very annoying to work with. The fencing starts to sag if you're not tightening it up very hard. So these vertical lines here helps very much to keep the fencing up, even though I'm not very careful to make it very tight here. Another thing that is good with only one spike here is that if the ground is very hard, you can do this drilling motion to get it down. It's also possible to use a rubber mallet to bang on the head here. So when the sheep has been here grazing and you need to collect the fencing, you just start in one end, and I usually point the spike upwards so it doesn't get tangled up, and keep it in one hand in the middle here, and then I go to the next pole, just collect it like this, and to the next, and the fencing will just the fencing will just follow me like this. This flexinet is 90 centimeters high and it is 50 meters long. So with a couple of sheep it is nice to have at least 6 of them. Then you can build paddocks, several paddocks, and move the sheep between them, and when you move the sheep to the next one you can take the other old one down. We usually just leave them like this so as it won't get tangled up, and we can take one in the other hand and another one in the other and go to the next place. But if we are going to move them by car or longer, we will fold them like this. Nu ska vi rulla, Ivar. Have the poles on one end. Ivar, vänta, härifrån där. And then fold them once like this, and then start to roll from this end very tightly. The tighter the better, the less it will tangle with the other nets. And then I have a thread here with 2 pieces, one this way and one the other way. Just make I don't know what this is in English. Bow tie? Like that. Now it's nice and tight. And it won't get messed up. And this is our sun-powered electrical fencing thingy. I have no idea what it's in English. But it's very nice, like this. The battery is inside and there's on and off button, and then one clamp goes to the fencing and one clamps on the earthing rod, and then I have a sledgehammer that follows this wherever it goes. So the sledgehammer is always here. And when I'm moving this, I'm just banging on this a little bit like this, and then take it up and move it to the next place. Very simple. Before we got this, we had one that was a little bit smaller, but since there is so many threads in one of these fences, the total length of the fence is very long, so it needs to be a little bit stronger, I guess. One aspect that is a little bit hard is the water management. Here we got 2 buckets with old car tires, so they won't spill them out immediately, so we carry water to them. I guess you get a little bit training. But as I already said, this vertical plastic line is the absolute most important thing to look for when getting these flexinets. Not the one with the loose thread as vertical as well. Like this. Instead of the plastic vertical lines, there is threads going down like this. And that makes the whole fence a lot less rigid, and it can sag like this. The ones with the hard vertical plastic lines, you don't have to be so careful putting it up so that you get it so tight, because it will stay up anyway. This is our chicken net, and I don't know, I would have preferred to have the vertical, harder, sturdier lines on this net as well. I have no idea why they have decided to do this. There is electrical wires in these horizontal lines, but not in the vertical lines. So I have no idea why they have chosen to do it like this. You have to be careful to make it really rigid so that it stays up. Wait, nu stänger vi. This is another kind of fencing. They have double points instead of a single point. So there is both positives and negatives with this. It's heavier and it tangles up more easily. So that's why I prefer the single point. And it's also hard to make the boring technique with double points if the ground is really hard. The positive with this is that you can trample them down using this shelf as a foothold. So it gets easier on your wrists while using this. There's also a little bit more support to keeping it steady with the double point. The flexinets are perfect for sheep, but if you only have cows, it is much simpler with only one wire and a system of reels with pre-installed wire for your desired lengths, and a bunch of posts. This all depends on your usual paddock sizes. With grown-up cows you should only need one wire, but if you have calves in the flock you probably need 2 wires. Ja, vi ska ju ta loss det där och så går vi ditåt. So these are our thoughts right now about these things. Of course, it could change, and we could learn something new tomorrow and see something in a different light. This is what can happen when one tries not to be dogmatic about things. But I sure feel like this is one of our most important videos yet.
So, if you are up for it, we challenge you to start thinking about how your food is produced, where it comes from, and look for local producers that care about the land and how they are managing it. Or maybe start produce your own food.
If you want to know more about holistic management and regenerative agriculture, you'll find a lot of information in this book. And also all the resources from Savory Institute. And a very good source of information and a great interesting story is from White Oak Pastures. We'll put some links in the description. I am convinced this is one of the most important topics of today. And it feels very nice to do something constructive instead of always have to react against big corporations destroying the land we live on. It is nice to actually do something useful that makes a big difference.
So we really hope that you got something out of this video.
So I guess this is it for this episode.
Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.
Jag vill sitta bredvid dig.
Ska du sitta bredvid?
Klick.
Jaha, vad ska du göra nu?
Ska du gå och mäta ström? Här. Då åker vi. Kom.
Thanks for watching.